Good evening and welcome to the breakdown. I am Tara Setmayer. This is the Rick Wilson, and we are beginning the first full week of the new Biden administration. And as many of you know, they were left quite a mess in the wake of the Trump administration's departure. And this episode, we are going to focus on COVID, the pandemic, one of the worst catastrophes left behind in the legacy of Donald Trump. So tonight we have two fantastic guests for you. First up, we have Dr. Vin Gupta. He is an ICU pulmonologist out in Washington State and a frequent guest on MSNBC and other networks where he talks all things COVID from a very candid, practical perspective. And he's with us tonight to talk about the new variants, the vaccine rollout, and what's common sense COVID behavior. So stay tuned for him, and you'll also be able to ask him questions. So make sure you, in your Ask the Breakdown hashtag, if you have a question specifically for Dr. Gupta, make sure that you indicate that. And then second, we have another fabulous guest to follow up. Pulitzer Prize winning reporter, Laurie Garrett. She is one of the preeminent global health policy experts in journalism. And she's here with us tonight to talk about what's happening with the Biden administration and what it looks like as we try to buckle up really for the next couple of months with the pandemic. So stay tuned for Laurie Garrett. And as I said, we always want your questions. So be sure to tweet us at hashtag Ask the Breakdown, and we will take some of your tweets throughout the show. And we do have the live Zoom room tonight as well. There's the meeting ID, and we'll bring you in live on the show to ask a question. So Rick, my dear, before we get into all of the COVID stuff, you were attacked on Fox News last night by one of the country's leading intellectuals. Not. And I want to give you an opportunity to respond. But let's look at a clip first.
Let's see the clip. Roll the tape.
Better. I have to say, Sean, I heard Rick Wilson say I sucked at Twitter. Well, I guess I sucked at it so much they had to shadow ban me along with Jim Jordan and Mark Meadows and Devin Nunes. And I just happened to check, when you look at my personal account and my official account, I have like twice as many followers as Rick Wilson. So if I suck, I wonder what that means about him.
Fire away, my friend.
The great thing about Matt Gaetz, as someone very wealthy and knowledgeable of Matt in Panama City, Florida last night, or Pensacola, Florida, emailed me last night, is that he squeals like a little girl. This guy is, I mean, first off, who gives a rat's balls how many Twitter followers I have or how many followers he has? I didn't say he sucked at Twitter. I said he sucked at life. I said Twitter bans people like him because they suck as humans, because they're racist and xenophobic and assholes, and they encourage violence and conspiracy theories, and they're general fuckwits who don't belong in the public discourse. But Matt decided he was going to try to have a penis contest with me regarding the Twitter follower count, which I got to say, the response of the internet was enormously gratifying, because I was sitting there like, did he really do that? Is that really like is that the length of his entire like ability to get in a dialogue here? Because it's the most sad little thing I've ever seen. Yeah, there was a whole lot of Hannity last night and a whole lot of Gaetz last night in the Fox world, because apparently we have been bothering them quite a lot. Apparently they are not happy with me and Steve and then Reed, the rest of the Lincoln Project. And so they're going to put us on Fox News and let Matt Gaetz go at me. Come on. Jesus
the whole thing
Christ.
is so absurd. It's asinine, as my grandmother used to say. Absolutely.
That word. That's a grandma word for you, asinine.
Yes. Nana, Gloria Setmayer, thank you for that. Rest in peace, Nana. But yeah, she would say that about things that are so absurd. And when you look up asinine, Matt Gaetz is in the dictionary. It is right next to him. This is a guy who also, after everything you just listed, he also brought a Holocaust denier to the inauguration one year. I mean, to the State of the Union one year as his guest. Do you remember that? His first State of the
Yeah,
Union?
the guy's name was Charles Johnson. He's a Holocaust denier. He's an alt-right activist, and he is one of these people that was banned from Twitter before it got cool to be banned from Twitter
Right.
years ago because violent threats. He apparently tried to put out a hit on Toure at one point. I was like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Oh, yeah. These
So,
people are
long
nuts.
story short, long story short, you know, Matt is surrounded by some people who are not nice people, and and
Sure.
and I get it. His forever leader Donald Trump is no longer in power, and so he didn't get the gig with Fox he thought he was going to get as a host. It's sad. I get why he's flailing and lashing out. I find it amusing and pathetic more than intimidating. Of course, it's kind of ridiculous.
It's so ridiculous. And so is his foundation. Honey, if you're going to wear the makeup, at least match it. So before we get, before we go any further on this, um, I think we're all just happy, relieved. There's been a weight off, like lifted off of our shoulders collectively as a nation now that Biden is president. And as I said in the open, like we have to deal with the long term damage and the wreckage that was just left behind. And of course, the pandemic is front and center. And that's why tonight's episode is going to be focused on that. But we also have an impeachment coming up. The impeachment articles were delivered to the Senate yesterday, one article actually of impeachment. And only 5 Senate Republicans voted today to move forward with that impeachment. Rand Paul put forward an amendment to try to dismiss it, and only 5 Republicans actually voted and said, "Let's move forward with the impeachment trial." In addition to the Democrats, obviously it passed. But one of those people who voted to dismiss it was Mitch McConnell, Rick. So those of us who felt like maybe Mitch was, he was flirting with convicting Trump, or he's pretty pissed off because he
No.
lost his Senate majority. Clearly, he's still staying on the sinking ship here with Trump. The SS Trumptanic.
Yep.
He's staying on it along with the Republican Party, and they are really going to go down in flames with this guy at the helm. And it is infuriating. I mean, the trial hasn't happened. I mean, a miracle could happen. A week, 2 weeks is a long time in politics, but I'm not holding my breath,
Sure
Rick,
is.
that they're actually going to convict this guy.
I think it's a long shot. I think we need to bring some attention to this. I think people have been distracted by the inauguration. They've been distracted by the necessity of a massive COVID response from the White House, which was an urgent priority that had to be addressed. And honestly, the White House is correct to begin focusing well, not exclusively, but intensely on COVID. But this really is a moment where anybody that was fooled by Mitch McConnell, and I warn people, don't be fooled by Mitch McConnell. Suddenly this week they're saying, "Wait, what? He screwed us over again? How could that? How could it be?" Scorpion, frog. Scorpions do what scorpions do. Anyway, but yeah, we're
Yeah,
gonna we're gonna bring some pressure on some of these members next week because they know Trump is guilty. They know he incited the
sure.
riot, the violence. They know he caused a major portion of it, and they also know that some of their colleagues, when rioters were in the Senate beating on doors trying to get into chambers, and senators had to barricade themselves in their offices and in their hideaways, and they don't think that Donald Trump should be held accountable. It tells you how morally collapsed they are. It tells you how completely detached from the old realities of the world they've become.
Without question, and just absolutely absconding their responsibility as elected officials. They have put a stain on their oaths of office. And once again, they're trying to use weak process arguments about the constitutionality of whether an ex president can be impeached. And it's, there's much more constitutional law experts who believe he can than don't. And yet, this is what they're trying to distract from, so they don't have to go on record to actually acknowledge Donald Trump's role in this whole thing. That they are choosing the side of an insurrectionist president who violated his most basic oath of office to protect the American people. and to protect the Capitol, protect life. He absconded from that. And here they are trying to argue process because they're cowards. They continue to be, and they continue to choose Donald Trump over the Constitution and over the country. And believe me, we will not let them go unpunished for that. They will be held accountable at the ballot box. 2022 is right around the corner. All right. Well, in an uncanny bit of timing, last week, Joe Biden's inauguration happened to fall on the 1-year anniversary of the very first COVID case detected here in the United States. And since then, more than 400,000 people have died, unfortunately. And it's only going to get worse from here before it gets better, unfortunately. But before we bring in Dr. Gupta, let's have a recap.
As the U.S. marks 1 year since the first case was diagnosed on U.S. soil.
The death toll in the U.S. continues to soar, well past 400,000.
Crossing yet another milestone. More than 25 million COVID-19 cases reported here since the start of the pandemic.
Growing frustration at the Trump administration's handling of vaccine distribution.
The new CDC director frustrated by the pass down she was given by the previous administration.
Quote, Biden and his advisors are inheriting no coronavirus vaccine distribution plan to speak of.
Long lines and confusion fueling outrage.
Hour after hour, we encountered this unwelcome message. Full.
There's also growing concern about a new, more contagious variant of the virus. It was first discovered in the UK and now has been detected in at least 22 states.
The U.S. will begin restricting travel for Brazil, the UK, Ireland, and 26 countries across Europe.
President Biden released a nearly 200-page national strategy for COVID, expanding vaccine manufacturing using the Defense Production Act, increasing the number of healthcare workers, and prioritizing fairness in distribution.
Having the federal government assist both financially as well as with logistics is going to be much better than where we were at beforehand, leaving it to already overburdened and underfunded public health and local state departments.
So we now have a national strategy to beat COVID-19, and our plan will take time.
It's a lot, folks. It's a lot. And it's time to bring in our first guest, Dr. Vin Gupta. He is a public health a public health expert, a ICU pulmonologist, and professor. He's a Harvard-trained lung specialist, as I said, and has spent the past 15 years working worldwide to improve public health for organizations including the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation at the University of Washington, the Harvard Global Health Institute, the World Health Organization, and the Pentagon Center for Global Health Engagement. Dr. Gupta, you are a welcomed guest here on the show because you talk common sense and you're frank with the American people, and I am a huge fan. So thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Tara and Rick.
So you recently said on MSNBC that we need to buckle up because it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. But it doesn't have to be this way. We don't have to lose 200,000 people. How come? How can we stop this? What can we do?
You know, Tara, what I was trying to get at is is to refocus us a bit as a country on the lived experience of all of us clinicians that are seeing patients and their families suffering in intensive care units across the country. And that's to say, we are appropriately focused on getting that vaccine in as many arms as possible, because that means normalcy, that means vacations, that means holidays with family, things that we all desperately need. But in that focus, sometimes we can take our eye off the prize here, which is ultimately mitigating the loss of life. And that's where those comments, that was the spirit of those comments. It's to say that every model that's out there, whether it's my home institution, the Institute for Health Metrics, CDC, Georgetown, you name it, President Biden citing we're going to cross 600,000 individuals lost, maybe by May 1st and beyond, that it's not preordained. It doesn't have to be that way. 120,000 or thereabouts Americans are in actual hospital settings right now with this virus. So we don't actually have to lose 200,000 individuals. And there's things that we can do now. What I've noticed, Tara and Rick, is inconsistency and lack of alignment, even now in public policy. And this isn't a criticism of the Biden administration or any particular governor, but it's a recognition that we need 50 states to align with what the Biden administration is putting out there in terms of evidence-based policies. They are reliant on governors and state and local health departments to do their part in terms of messaging and policy. What you're seeing is we are telling people to wear double masks now because of these new strains. I saw an article in the Times recently suggesting because of these strains, maybe only go to the grocery store for 15 minutes once a week. That's what we're putting out there in the public domain. We're telling people, Dr. Fauci says this rightly, don't congregate, don't invite your neighbors over for a glass of wine or dinner because it's too dangerous. And yet, 47 governors still say it's okay to have indoor dining with restrictions. And even though the CDC put out guidelines today about in-person instruction for schools, we're doing so without systematic testing in place. And teachers, rightly so, in my opinion, at least high-risk teachers, are going to go in there without guarantee of vaccination. It's dissonant. It doesn't make sense. And I think the lack of alignment across all elements of society really mitigates trust. And so that's what I was getting at. Let's align public policy with existing realities so we can lower that number.
100%. I'm so glad that you brought up the indoor dining thing. My mom and I often kvetch about this. She lives in New Jersey, and my mom is high risk. She has asthma. She has an autoimmune disease, and she was, one of those people very early on who was very diligent a year ago to make sure that she secured some N95 masks when we could still do that, and did all the precautions even before it was en vogue to, do all of these things to protect yourself. She was like, yeah, I'm not risking that. And we've often conversed about what the hell is the governor of New Jersey doing allowing indoor dining? Gyms are open, you have indoor dining, and yet you have these variants that are more transmissible. You have people dying in record numbers. And the policy, it seems like the American people have just become desensitized to the seriousness and deadly aspect of this virus. What do you think? What are some of the myths right now that are floating around that have given people a certain amount of almost this dismissive attitude, like, well, if I wear a cloth mask, I'm fine, or well, if it's indoor dining and there's only 10 people in there, I'm fine. What are some of the top myths that are going around out here that people need to know so they can make the right choices and behave properly to protect themselves and their families?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for teeing that up. I would say number one, it's the all of this is about behavior change. I mean, the science has been out there now for at least 6 months, if not greater, about what are the right things to put in place. Now it's convincing people to do them. So it's more behavioral health than anything else. So one of it is this conception that, it's not going to affect me or my loved ones. It's going to impact everybody else. And that's one of the main motivations behind people a 1 million plus people per day around the holidays getting on airplanes, even though we're begging them not to. It won't affect me. It won't affect the people that I'll see at the end of my flight, but everybody else is at risk. How do you contend with that? It's all about purely messaging and really reaching people. So that's one, the sense of immortality. And we see that this is not just pandemic related. That comes with respect to people with addictions or people who smoke or drink a lot. This is that problem here, that this sense of immortality, it won't affect me, it will affect everybody else. Obviously, addiction's a very different thing from a pandemic here, but there is that sense of immortality going on here. So that's one. Number two, I have seen way too many people wear just the wrong thing. Neck gaiters, for example, is really common. And that is just not effective. And I think that the seeds of misinformation, the seeds of what is and is not effective were planted early on. It's really hard to fight that now. And now so that's part of it as well. And then number three is this, and I think this is going to be really hard to hold the line here, guys, but this notion that vaccination means liberation, that once you get the vaccine, I can get on a flight to see grandma, grandpa, or the grandkids, or I can go to Hawaii. We don't know that yet. But actually, the day that I got my vaccine I'll never forget it. It was December 16th. The Today Show asked me to do it live. I was happy to oblige in whatever small platform I have. That day, I actually tweeted out something effective, I will continue to mask and remain vigilant and continue to socially distance until Dr. Fauci and the experts say not to. And remember, Tucker Carlson and Laura Ingraham and Ted Cruz came after me for saying that, even though that's the science-based approach. But they're distorting this definition of freedom as us telling them what to do, versus my definition of freedom is the ability to live a long life. So it's distortion of truth to this day that continues to permeate all these basic common sense debates.
Well, you're in good company with being attacked by those idiots. Go ahead, Rick.
Dr. Gupta, I'm curious about one thing. You mentioned there's a sort of disconnect, a dissonance with the state governments. If you were advising the president, how would you address that? Because I mean, some of these guys are in that category of what I call the stubborn Republicans, like Ron DeSantis in Florida, who didn't want to be as candid about COVID's impact because he was afraid of the political impact. Other folks just don't know how to, I think, marshal resources. What would you advise Joe Biden right now if you were giving him counsel on this matter, and how to convince these governors to do the right thing with the states and their not only the vaccination program but other COVID mitigation efforts?
Rick, I would lean into what I personally, to whatever extent I've been effective or my colleagues have been effective in messaging, I would lean in to personal stories of Floridians, for example, and really actually try to identify healthcare workers and others who've been impacted by, say, open indoor dining or bars being open or travel, and elevate them and their stories. I mean, at this point, what I don't think is effective is the president or his science emissaries going on in front of a podium and rehashing science and trying to sound really smart. Because the people that they already have. It's really reaching the people they don't have, to your point, Rick. And that's where I really think storytelling is vital. But do it from the voters that are going to hold DeSantis, for example, accountable. I mean, he's the worst offender here, even Brian Kemp, to some degree. There's a who's who here that we can name. But if he hears it directly from people that he's accountable to, I'm not saying he's going to change his mind, but to me, that's more powerful than Biden saying the latest study suggested X or Y, because people are now entirely numb to getting cited studies and that the patronizing sort of style that people perceive that in a patronizing way, at least in my opinion. But if you tell them stories from people that they have to be accountable to, I think that's your best shot.
Great insight, Dr. Gupta, and I appreciate you with that answer. Let me follow up with one more thing, Tara. A lot of the exhaustion, the mental exhaustion of a year now, basically, of disruption and isolation for people, they do feel like the vaccine's going to give them an instant get out of jail free card. And you touched on it earlier, but that concept that just when you get vaccinated, we're good to go everywhere. I mean, we could end up exacerbating the problem as people say, "Oh, I got the first shot, I can travel. Oh, I'm good to go." There is a lag time, correct, after the vaccines of weeks, in fact, before you're fully vaccinated and protected.
Yeah, Rick, thank you for bringing that up. I mean, there's just a few things. I promise to be concise. If you get the 2-dose regimen, so Pfizer, Moderna, you're correct. 21 days for Pfizer, 2 doses apart, day 0, day 21. For Moderna, it's day 0, day 28. We don't think true immunity really sets in as defined by the clinical trials until about 7 to 10 days after each respective regimen. In the case of Johnson & Johnson, it's a 1-dose shot. 7 to 10 days after that shot, we think you're going to have true immunity, although we'll see based on the data they present to the FDA shortly. So yes, you're correct. Right now, we do not know if the vaccines prevent transmission of the virus. We know they will keep you out of the ICU and from seeing me or my colleagues, which is reason enough to get the vaccine. It'll save your life. We don't know if it's going to reduce transmission, although we think early data suggests it will. But that uncertainty is the reason why we're saying, please, until we've reached herd immunity by mid-July, we hope, if not earlier, continue to be vigilant, mask, distance, avoid unnecessary things like travel for the moment. So that's one. Two, I would say, Rick, it raises the question, once Johnson & Johnson's vaccine gets approved, and I sense there is that it will by the end of February, and talking to their reps, it's a 1-dose shot. And if I'm the Biden administration and we're operating in a disaster, I come from a military background where you just have to make hard decisions. At some point, when do you say, I'm noticing the lack of vaccine uptake in certain communities or amongst, for example, communities of color or in rural exurban zip codes? At what point do you say, you know what, we're going to give them the 1-dose shot? It's easier to convince them to take 1 dose than 2. We know the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is likely going to be very effective. At what point do you start to make those decisions? I think we have to at least have that conversation.
I'm glad that you brought that up because the reluctance to take the vaccine in the minority community is huge because of the history from with the Tuskegee experiments and everything, and even it transcends education and class. Black professional friends of mine are like, I'm not taking that vaccine, no way. I'm gonna wait, and I'm like, listen here, okay, you guys need to do this. This is not Tuskegee. This is not some type of an experimental thing. And I have a very good friend I went to George Washington University with, who is a doctor, Dr. Dan Fagbui, who he's Black, and he said, listen, these vaccines were not just developed 6 months ago. The technology for this has been ongoing basically since SARS. And so this has been going for years and years and years, and they took the technology and applied it to this vaccine, which is why they were able to get one, an effective a few of them so quickly. Can you reassure people again that the vaccine didn't just happen, a couple months ago? They didn't rush through trials because people were reluctant. Even I said that. I'm like, if it was under the Trump regime, I'm not taking it. So can you explain just a little bit to reassure people that the vaccine is safe, and particularly the importance of getting it for people in minority communities? They don't have to worry; they're not being experimented on.
Absolutely. Thank you, Joe. This is what I'll say. The Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines, people may have heard by now, it's built on this technology, mRNA technology, where you're a fancy way of saying basically you're injecting a piece of the genetic footprint of COVID-19 in a biological way into your body. And then the body basically builds a part of the virus that your immune system recognizes, and antibodies get produced over the period of 3 to 4 weeks. That platform is not foreign. This is not the first time that we're dealing with that platform. It hasn't just been developed in 2020. This platform has existed for decades, as your friend noted, Tara. This is the first time that's actually resulted in a commercially available vaccine, to be clear. But that technology has existed for decades, and it's just been co-opted in a really, really smart way by smart scientists to produce a very effective vaccine that, oh, by the way, produces very rare side effects. And it produces, even in the rare event that you were to get a side effect, say a severe allergic reaction, as an ICU doc, I can treat that reaction in the morning and have you out, ideally home for dinner, same day. But
Right.
That is not the case with severe COVID pneumonia. And that's the key piece here.
That's right. My husband was fortunate enough to get the vaccine. He is a federal law enforcement officer, so he was able to get that. But the unfortunate thing is that I can't get it yet because it's not widely available, and he can still bring it home to me, which is part of this problem here. We're not, like you said, we're not sure. Do you still transmit it? Do you not? We don't know. So you still have to continue to do the same responsible, common sense behaviors until we reach herd immunity. Before we go to our first caller for you, you have a habit of going on air and going through the list of what's an acceptable mask and what isn't. Can you please go through the list, starting with what's the best and what we need not to be doing, especially now with these new variants? The idea of double masking is now all of a sudden en vogue, when a lot of people have been doing that for a while, if you've been paying attention. But I think it's really important that you explain to our audience what type of masks they need to wear to be safe.
You bet. I'm going to see. I actually have a mask right here. I'm going
to
grab it real quick.
You've got props. I like it.
So this is what I'll say. The best mask, before I show the prop, is the N95 mask, which is the mask that you often will, as a doc, I have easy access to it. It's fitted, but it isn't available for general public utilization. for those that are watching right now, you can get something called a KF94 mask that's produced in South Korea that we think approximates the quality of an N95, but not entirely. And that those are available online. Multiple merchants sell it, and those also are very protective, and they have great fit. Fit's very important. A KN95 mask is available also online, something very similar, and it also provides you good protection, but not N95 level protection, but a great option if you're going to the grocery store or doing anything in public. What you'll commonly see if you're trying to use things that you already have around the house, cloth mask, multiple layer cloth mask, ideally at least 2 layers of thick fabric. What you ideally have is a cloth mask where you have head ties where you can actually tie it around your back so you can ensure a close, tight fit. And then you put a 3-ply medical mask that I really have been a big fan of, that's been time tested in multiple studies over that. And you'll notice these ear loops here allow for a really non-snug, loose fit, which we don't love, which is why you would put that on top of that tight-fitting cloth mask. If, say, you're tired and you're just exhausted with this whole debate on masks and you just want to wear one mask, if you're walking your dog or going to the grocery store and you don't want to wear 2 masks, which I've gotten a lot from a lot of people, at the very minimum, tie the ear loops on your blue mask so you can get a tighter fit. So I've been doing this from day one. I double mask when possible. Obviously, I have privileged access to N95s, but this is something I will also do, is wear a cloth mask and then tie the ear loop on the blue mask so that you can get a tighter fit, because fit is important. These are high quality, but try to tie those ear loops and get a tighter fit around those cheeks.
Fabulous. And neck gaiters are the worst, right? No neck gaiters. They might
No
look
neck
cute,
gaiters.
they're fashionable. No neck gaiters.
And I'll, yes, 100%. And what I'll also add, if you're 55 and older, or if you have a pre-existing condition, consider some sort of eyewear, either eyeglasses or a face shield. I know it might seem like overkill, but we are in extraordinary times. So if you're a pre-existing condition over 55, go to the grocery store for an extended period, put on a face shield or some sort of eye protection.
Does that also apply to flying? I know a lot of people are flying, which they shouldn't be. I mean, I'm assuming if you wouldn't fly right now if you had the option, right?
Don't fly. You can't mitigate risk, and it's just not worth it. We've seen multiple studies suggest transmission in flights, even if you're doing all the right things. But if you must fly, absolutely face shield plus the best type of mask, as we just talked about, and then quarantine on the opposite end for at least 5 to 7 days at minimum to prevent any sort of transmission. So yes, let me just quickly say here, the only airplane, to my knowledge, at this point that keeps the middle seat open is Delta. So if you absolutely must fly, at this point, and I'm not getting paid by Delta. I'm just looking at the facts. Consider Delta.
It's unbelievable. Let's take our first caller. He leaves from Los Angeles. Thank you for that. People need to know the facts. Hello, welcome.
Hi. Thanks for having me. Thanks for taking my question.
Absolutely. What's your question for Dr. Gupta?
Dr. Gupta, I was just wondering if you could talk to the Biden administration, what would you tell them to do to pressure the Senate to make something happen for funding for opening schools? Because like where I live in Los Angeles, public school kids have not stepped foot in a classroom in over 11 months. And it just seems like, they also set the regulations, Governor Newsom said that the kids must have, or at least LA, vaccines before they can attend school. And so I'm just wondering what you would recommend.
So thank you. A really important question. Something
Thank you.
This is what I would say. And I know they're already thinking about this, and part of their $1.9 trillion rescue package is focused on this specific issue. So I would just emphasize what they're already thinking about. Rapid testing, high quality rapid testing on site, so we can test systematically, at least systematic surveillance testing for a proportion of school-age children. And then 100%, in my personal opinion, mandatory testing of teachers and staff until they're all vaccinated, to me would at least be low-hanging fruit. Right now, we don't really know. We see all these studies claiming transmission rates in schools. We aren't really testing children. in any significant amount of proportion right now, much less adult staff. So I think we don't know what we don't know, especially with a new strain. So I want an emphasis on high quality rapid testing infrastructure for school districts across the country. And then ideally, at least adult staff that are at high risk for a bad outcome from COVID-19, they should be given priority access to the vaccine before they're required to come back for in-person instruction. And then ideally you get teachers really phased in all teachers phased in as quickly as possible.
I'm glad that you answered that, because I know that you've done some informal consultations with teachers unions and things about how to safely reopen classrooms, because this has been an issue all across the country, and people are wondering, teachers in New Jersey, in my home state, said, yeah, we're not going back into the classroom. We don't care what you say until we get priority vaccines and it's safe for us again. And this is happening all over the country. All right,
You're right.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Then we'll take
No. I was just going to agree with you. I think there's just a lot unknown here. People are anxious, and at minimum, high-risk teachers should be vaccinated before they're expected to return. But these other interventions are really key.
Seems like common sense, but there's a lot of lack of that around this issue. It's mind-blowing at times. Okay, what's our tweet question? All right, ask the breakdown from Work Too Much. With the possibility of some not receiving their second COVID dose until after the 21-day window when supplies are replenished, is there a possibility of a COVID mutation while immunity builds in the system?
It's a great question. I think the answer to that is unlikely, because you'll have partial protection that we don't really know the degree of partial protection from the one dose, how long it lasts, but you will be protected for at least a certain period of time after that one dose. So as long as there isn't a significant delay, ideally no longer than 4 days past 21 days for that second dose in the case of the Pfizer regimen, I think the chance of a mutation occurring where then you would be somehow vulnerable to that new strain is unlikely.
Speaking of vaccines, my mom will kill me if I don't ask you. She wants to know, for people like her who have autoimmune diseases, and she's over 65, is it safe for them to take these vaccines, all the ones that are available?
Absolutely. There's no contraindication whatsoever to any of the vaccines if you have an autoimmune condition or if you're on immunosuppressive medication. If anything, you're prioritized by the CDC Advisory Committee on Immunization Practice guidelines. So you should get it as soon as possible. There's no contraindication. You should definitely get it as soon as possible.
Fantastic. We have another caller for you from my home state of New Jersey. I love it. We're representing. Do we have our caller? There he is.
How are you this afternoon?
Doing well. What is your
Good.
question for Dr. Gupta?
My question for the doctor is, I work in the African-American community, and I know we still have issues with taking vaccines. Common sense information, if I was to give that out, what information would I give African-Americans to help them make more informed decisions in reference to taking the vaccine?
Thank you for that question. I would lead by saying that these vaccines, regardless of type, in terms of the ones that have been approved, will save your life if you've been exposed to the virus. Far and away, we have an extraordinarily effective set of vaccines. They will keep you out of the ICU. I would emphasize, frankly, and I don't mean to scare anybody here, but I think blunt talk here is really critical, because for a lot of people in the country, they haven't experienced COVID-19 in any other way than it's disrupted their social life, or it's disrupted the way in which they engage with work. But this virus can affect anybody that's a teenager all the way up to those who are in their 80s plus, and it can result in long ICU stays. It can affect people that are previously healthy across demographic categories. And so I would emphasize that this vaccine will prevent that from happening. It will save your life. That's number one. Number two, I would say that these vaccines are broadly safe. And if you're in the rare group that might have a side effect, those will be monitored closely in the vaccination clinic in which you'll receive the vaccine, and that those side effects are readily treatable. in the rare event that you might experience it. And so there is really no reason not to get the vaccine. These will keep you out of the ICU. They will save your life, and they will allow us to get to normalcy more quickly. And the side effects are rare and easily manageable if they occur.
I'm so glad that's such an important public relations issue that the Biden folks need to really get on, because it's real. People have a lot of fear about that. We have about a minute left, and then we have to let you go, as much as we'd love to keep you for the next 2 hours. But you're a busy guy, and we want to make sure you go back and treat your patients. You are, as you mentioned, also in the military. You're a major in the Air Force. Thank you for your service. And you participated in a vaccination program with Amazon. They sponsored this, and you were really complimentary of the way it was handled. Can this be scaled up, and what role does the military play in that?
Tara, I don't see why not. I think we need just physically more vaccination sites, and we need to broaden our definition of who's a vaccinator, as long as we have enough clinical staff trained to address any emergency event that may occur, however unlikely. So yes, I thought it was incredibly effective what we did, that partnership between Virginia Mason and Amazon here in Seattle. We got 2,000 Seattleites immunized with supply that was excess supply here that we were able to repurpose. And it was done quickly within 4 days. So as long as you have the IT infrastructure, the basic ability to schedule appointments, basic messaging capabilities, and space, there's a lot of people who want to volunteer their time to make this happen. We just need more of those sites, at least 400 across the country, spread out across spread out across geography. So it's not just urban, but exurban and rural. I think we can make this happen, but we need to say that the vaccinator itself does not have to be an MD or a healthcare professional. It can be somebody that can be trained to become a vaccinator. I think that's going to be really important as well.
I mean, if we have LPNs be able to give vaccinations, that's going to spread the workload dramatically and allow a lot more throughput. As long as you said, there's still medical supervision in the event of the rare, reaction to it. But I think expanding that trained cadre is really important.
I agree.
Who makes that decision? Who makes that decision, actually? How do we make that happen?
State departments of health, actually. It's 50 different approaches, unfortunately.
Okay. So we know, because we can bring that to our call to action, because our viewers are very active. We appreciate their engagement, and they often ask us, well, what can we do to help things get better? What can we do? So that's why I asked that. Dr. Vin Gupta, you are a blessing. Thank you so much for everything that you do.
Sure. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Yeah, it's just there's so much going on, and I know if for folks that want to find out more information, please follow Dr. Gupta on Twitter. He's always putting out great information. And we ran out of time, but I know that you talk a lot about monoclonal antibodies as a treatment that is more available to people than they realize. And there is a place where people can go to find out if it's available to them. Quickly, what is that website?
It's covid.infusioncenter.org, and I'll retweet it so people have access to it if they want to look.
That could be life-saving treatment for you. That's what the president got, and that's why he survived. So if it's good enough for the president, it's good enough for us, and it's available. So thank you so much, Dr. Gupta. You are my favorite Gupta. My mom liked the Sanjay Gupta over at CNN, but there's another one, and now she's a fan of yours as well. Have a great evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, Ray.
I love him. He's the best. All right.
Talk about a guy who's got hustle for days. He is out there doing the public information part of public health in a way like almost nobody else. I mean, I think he's probably one of the most prominent voices out there, and it's always practical. It's always like, here's the 3 steps, boom, bada bang, bada boom. Save your life, save your family's life, do this. It's simple. Get vaccinated, wear them. I mean, he really is a relief. A friend of mine was texting me during the thing, like, just so thankful we'd had him on, because he's a very steady, calm voice in something where there's a lot of misinformation from all over the place.
He represents the best of us, and I'm thrilled that he is doing double duty, not only as an ICU pulmonologist, but also military, and also doing the public relations part of this. It's not easy, and that's why I said God bless him for it. Well, you know who else is doing a wonderful service for us? Our next guest, Pulitzer Prize-winning global health expert, Laurie Garrett is joining us now. Laurie.
Oh, Laurie Garrett.
There she is. Thank you
Hi,
for
guys.
joining us tonight.
Laurie.
I wanted to make sure that we had you back. You are a returning guest, friend of the show here, because you, for those who don't know Laurie, she was one of the only people who saw this COVID pandemic coming before everyone else and was warning us, because you are an infectious disease policy expert on these things. And the last time we were on the show, we were at about 200,000 deaths. Now we're over 400,000. Possibly going to reach an awful threshold of 600,000 deaths. But we have a new administration. What is the Biden administration doing right?
Communicating with regularity, with many voices, but with the same message from multiple voices. Giving clear and honest answers to questions. That's the big breakthrough so far. As far as trying to get through all the log jams and the difficulties we're experiencing, particularly with the rollout of the vaccine, I think it would be asking a great deal to imagine that, having been in office for less than a week, they would have tackled all these issues. Obviously, they have not.
That's right. And for those, as I said in the beginning, who don't know, you're the author of several books. You're the author of Betrayal of Trust, The Collapse of Global Public Health, and The Coming Plague, Newly Emerging Diseases in a World Out of Balance. And that's where you predicted that one day we would face a pandemic like this. And it just feels, you recently gave a talk. I was reading your Twitter feed, and you talked about how you gave a talk to, I think it was Cedar Sinai, and you just said that you started to get really upset as you were going over where we are, and that you felt like the response to this global pandemic has been an epic human failure.
I think at a global scale, we have a massive catastrophic failure. And while there have been many great heroes trying to do the right thing, and of course, indefatigable healthcare workers on the front lines, so I don't want to say anything that diminishes their great contributions, but this effort, this global response has been hideous, horrible. And our national response, of course, is the worst. We have the highest rate of infection, and our death rates are horrible, and so on and so forth. And what's really startling to me is when I think about this time last year, I was monitoring reports out of China. I was up every night, 2, 3, 4 in the morning, because that was midday in China, trying to see what was going on before the censors would knock things off the Chinese website. So you had to be watching in real time to get the reports and see the images. And at that moment, it was obvious we had a horrible, catastrophic epidemic unfolding, and that if it came here, we would not be able to implement the same sorts of procedures the Chinese were implementing across their country. I mean, there's no way we would lock down half our population at once as a federal responsibility, shut down all our major highways, all our airports, all our trains, order all people to remain inside their homes, and so on and so forth. We've come as close as we're probably going to get. But the key intervention that was going on at this time in China that was successful for them and it brought their epidemic under control, that we have not done, was creation of humane, large-scale quarantine centers for people who were infected but didn't require hospitalization, weren't seriously ill, and needed to be separated from their families so that they wouldn't infect everyone in the household. You know, in Wuhan, as I experience here in New York, we live in crowded, relatively small spaces. We don't have a room to go to be separated from the rest of the household and not infect our families. China set up a system that involved essentially massive voluntary quarantine. And they built these quarantine centers overnight out of stadiums, ballparks, schools, universities, and so on. And we've really never repeated this. Here in New York City, we have a policy where individuals can be voluntarily sequestered in hotels at the expense of the city government, where they will be separated from their families or their roommates. They'll have room service, TV, everything. But very few people even know that's available, and few take advantage.
That's the first I've heard of that. And voluntarily, that sounds like it makes sense. We all know that we can't even get people in this country to wear masks, for goodness sakes, never mind the government coming and telling them, all right, you got to go quarantine in a quarantine center. Forget about it. We thought we saw an insurrection on the 6th. It would have been everywhere on that. But your point, though, is that they took the tough actions that worked for them to mitigate this. And the behavior and the decisions made by the Trump administration that set the scene for what we have now was just a dereliction of duty. It was gross negligence by creating this environment where it was somehow some liberty issue by not doing simple things to protect ourselves so we wouldn't be here right now. Can you talk a little bit about what Europe is doing as far as the vaccine distribution, as far as getting people masks, compared to what we're doing? Because they seem to have it a bit more together than we do, like Germany.
Well, I'm not sure that's true. First of all, when you say Europe, keep in mind, you're talking multiple countries with different policies in every single country. So there are parts of Europe that are in disastrous shape. I mean, Italy, the whole government has collapsed. There's nobody in charge of COVID. It's spreading widely, and the new variants are there. So, you wouldn't want to be like Italy, for example, at this time. And you certainly, though it has dissociated itself from Europe, in my imagination, the UK is still European, and they are in a really terrible situation right now. The Republic of Ireland has seen more than exponential growth since week before Christmas because of the new variant, the B117 UK variant, completely out of control there. I think if you look around and cherry pick different parts of Europe, there are elements of their experience that we ought to be emulating, and we're not. Top of the list for me would be Denmark, which is screening every sample they can find of virus for its whether or not it is a new variant strain. And they're really isolating those who carry the variant strains, asking them to separate from their families or stay indoors under voluntary quarantine and so on. In Germany, they are now debating some pretty tough policies along the same lines because of the new variant strains. I think our real crisis now is the strains that are worse than the UK variant. UK variant is highly transmissible, up to 70% more so than garden variety COVID. And according to Prime Minister Boris Johnson and the Ministry of Health study that came out about 5 days ago, it's up to 30% more dangerous, meaning people are 30% more likely to die if infected with that strain. But the South African and Brazilian strains are more worrying, actually, because not only are they more contagious and possibly more dangerous to individuals, but they also seem to be at least partially resistant to available vaccines. So we're in a mad race now.
Really quick, just Laurie, about that. The Moderna vaccine and Pfizer, they're doing something to adjust for that South African variant, right?
Maybe.
Okay. I thought I read that they're looking to, because they're concerned that their current
they have been testing. Yeah, what they've been doing is they've been testing the vaccines in test tubes, if you will, in studies in the lab against various types of antibody assault coming from the plasma of surviving individuals and so on. And they see a diminished immune response. Now, there still are antibodies being made, and the antibodies are still having some effect and possibly enough of an effect, but certainly not as strong an effect as against the garden variety COVID strains. Now, Moderna and Pfizer both are making what are called mRNA vaccines, which are relatively easy to modify and manufacture. So they are looking at either making some kind of a modification that would add the appearance of the current mutant forms for your antibodies to recognize, or possibly coming up with multivalent vaccines. You know, every year when you get vaccinated for flu, you're actually getting vaccinated against 5 different types of flu at once. So that's a multi-variant or multivalent vaccine. And so they're looking at doing something similar like that for COVID response. But all of that is, in a sense, down the road. And of course, a big what if and what shall we do in that picture is, how's the FDA going to deal with this? Because normally, if we make a multivalent vaccine and we add some new tweaks, it goes through another stage of FDA approval, safety trials, you know, a little clinical efficacy tests. But we're in such a pell-mell rush now. How do we go about certifying that these things are what they claim to be? And it's possible we're going to see more and more of FDA's sort of way of being, its rigor, be diminished and whittled away as we find ourselves confronting this whole new range of mutations. And by the way, we're not talking about 3 or 4 or 5 mutant strains. We're talking about quite a large number. It seems to be, if you look hard enough, you find them.
Oh my gosh. Rick Wilson.
About this is the emergence of all these mutant strains that appear to be more transmissible than the original COVID-19 strain. Isn't that one of the things in viruses? It's kind of a trade-off in some ways. The faster they spread, the quicker they burn out. I mean, is there some sort of upside for us in being able to, if we tackle this and it builds out herd immunity quicker, along with a full vaccination program? I'm just curious, like, how does the additional discovery of all these new strains play into the math of getting this under control? My question was kind of backwards.
I think, Rick, you should look at it a different way. If I can suggest, the way to look at this is to ask, why is this happening? I mean, you look at MERS, there are no variant strains of MERS of any significance. The original SARS, there's no variant strains of the original SARS that are of any phenotypic significance of any kind. You go down the list of coronaviruses, and even common cold viruses, they just keep coming back in roughly the same form, decade after decade, and you get reinfected. So why is this happening at what looks like a pell-mell pace for the family of coronaviruses with this particular COVID? And I think the answer is that, first of all, we've reached a kind of critical mass in terms of the numbers of human beings carrying virus in them right now in the world. So there's just a huge amount of exposure. And secondly, I think we're doing, on an evolutionary basis, roughly what we did with antibiotics, which is to say there's widespread overuse and misuse. There's a huge percentage of people getting undertreated or inadequately treated. There's people who are immunosuppressed and then exposed to virus. What we're really doing is this massive evolutionary selection process where pressure is being put on the viruses to select for escape mutants that escape our antibody response. So it's predictive that as we go forward, we're going to see more and more and more escape from the human. And we're throwing, meanwhile, monoclonal antibodies and, you know, oh, maybe we could go with 1 dose of vaccine instead of 2, or maybe we could spread it out 50 days instead of 21. We're essentially already messing with our very weaponry. And just as we did with antibiotics, gee, maybe instead of taking amoxicillin for 10 days, I don't like the side effects. As soon as I feel okay, after 5 days, I'll stop taking them. Now you're breeding drug-resistant bacteria inside your own body because you made a choice to mess with your meds. On a kind of global scale, we're already doing this experiment. You know, we threw things like hydroxychloroquine and a whole range of different drugs at people. We're throwing everything but the kitchen sink at people in our desperation to keep people alive. Well, a lot of what's happening is that they're being suboptimally treated, and they have virus in them for 40 or 50 or 60 days, which gives the virus plenty of time to select for mutant strains that get around the immune response. And then finally, everywhere we look, we're finding different animal species are carrying this virus. So, gorillas in the San Diego Zoo, minks on farms in Idaho and Denmark, people's pet cats, leopards, tigers, lions, pretty much the whole feline phyla of animals. And every time the virus goes through a different species, it mutates to adapt to the species it's infecting. If it comes back out of that species to our species again, it's a different virus. And so we're really, here we are. This is why I get so angry, Tara. You asked me, why was I tweeting that? I was so angry. We're just doing everything so badly. Our thinking is so reactive and short term. We're not looking at the big picture here. This is a very dangerous virus. It's so contagious that the measures we've taken, masking and social distancing, have obliterated all the other respiratory disease viruses from our community. Hardly anybody's getting the flu. People aren't coming down with common colds. Respiratory viruses virtually nixed out. And yet, this virus is spreading because it's so much more contagious, so much more insidious in its aerosolization and its ability to jump from human to human. And now we're getting these new variants on top of everything else.
And now you're telling us it's going into pets, animals and pets. I mean,
America.
I know. That's it. Let's just pack it up. My husband jokes. He says he's moving to Elysium. If you've ever seen that movie, he's going to the moon.
I mean, the answer is we need a strategic plan, and we don't have one. And by the way, the Biden plan posted on the White House website the day after the inauguration. It's very ambitious. It's nearly 200 pages of basically tactical maneuvers, how to get around the virus with tactic 1, tactic 2, tactic 3. But it doesn't have a strategy. It doesn't state what is our strategic goal. Is the goal of the Biden administration to get everybody back to work, to deal with the economy, or is the goal to eradicate the virus? Or where is it somewhere in between that? Eliminating disease, but keeping the virus circulating, getting everybody vaccinated. How often do we have to be vaccinated against every new variant? We are operating without a strategy, and the WHO is the same thing. There is no strategic plan.
And do you think that can be rectified? I mean, I think that the Biden administration is kind of doing what you said before. They're being really reactionary because they were left with this disaster. So they're trying to just react as quickly as possible. We're going to get new vaccine doses since the Trump administration didn't pay for enough vaccine doses. God only knows why. Probably because the cruelty is the point, but that's another thing. So all of these things are reactionary because they're just trying to, put a Band-Aid over the bigger problem here. Is there anything that they're doing right now that you think is actually a good step in the right direction, or some type of strategic plan that's actually a good thing to help the country? Starting maybe with the vaccine, 200 million new doses. Is that enough? Is that good? Tell us something good, Laurie.
Well, I was pleased to hear the president say today that he wants to go for a much larger rollout of vaccine. That's essential. At the pace that we're going right now, which is close to the 1 million a day for 100 days that he called for, well, then we're going to go, you do the math, it'll be 300 and some days before we've got sufficient immunity in America that we can stop vaccinating, or we can go back to work, or whatever it is we're trying to do. I would like to see a clear statement of what our strategic objective is. And when I say that, I would add that the whole world is thrilled to see an administration come in that's going to engage on the global stage. rejoin WHO, come back into the fold. And part of that is hoping that the United States will put forward a global strategic plan and push for something. So, let's start at the top. You have two key options. You can either say, our plan is to eradicate the virus, in which case you're going the smallpox option. You're out to vaccinate the entire planet and to find all the animals that are carrying the virus and vaccinate them, and completely eliminating this relatively new, to us, our knowledge, new virus from the planet. The second option is you say, we're going to eliminate disease. So the virus will still be there. It'll still be in our environment. We'll still get infected, but we won't get severe COVID disease and die of it. Now that is pretty much the HIV model. So what we've done with HIV/AIDS is we've thrown our hands up and said, gosh, we don't know how to make a vaccine against this. We don't know how to make this new virus disappear from the planet, but we're going to engage in a massive multi-billion-dollar per year program of global mobilization of resources to identify and treat every HIV positive person on Earth, largely at the expense of United States taxpayers. All right, fine. So if we go that option, then unlike HIV, which is you get infected once, you get medicated for the rest of your life, this would be an option that says we look constantly for reinfection and re-exposure and mutant strains, and we're kind of combining the scale of transfer of resources from the wealthy world to the poor world that we've done with HIV, but also with a layer of vaccination that's annual, like flu. Either way you look at it, the options are pretty daunting. And because they're so daunting, no one wants to say it out loud. In fact, I was in a WHO meeting where they said straight up, this is just too hideous to lay out. We want to see some better tools appear, some better miracles from somewhere before we state what is the appropriate strategic objective.
That is, there's just so much. It's overwhelming. I do not envy the Biden administration's Corona task force, what they're facing, what HHS is facing, what health professionals are facing. It is really, really a Herculean task on a scale that I don't think we've seen since the pandemic of 1918. And I just feel like at least we know that science is leading this effort here, and not ego or some kind of kook theories like it was under Trump. Unreal. Before we let you go, Laurie, we have a tweet for you that we hope you can answer, and then we'll let you go. Thank you for being so generous with your time tonight, too. All right. Being Bernstein, for Ms. Garrett, how much at risk are we for whatever next pandemic is inevitably coming our way? That's a perfect question for you.
Yeah. Well, there will be another pandemic. That's a given. There's no way to know when or what form of virus it might be. It could actually be some highly drug-resistant bacterial disease. In any rate, there's no way to predict with specificity. I remember when I wrote The Coming Plague, and I was on the original book tour in 1995, and most of the people that interview you on a book tour have never cracked the spine of the book, right? They just look at the cover and they come up with their questions. And so the most common question I was getting is, The Coming Plague, gee, what is it? What plague?
Right.
And it was very hard to try and over again say, we don't know. If we knew the specific organism, it wouldn't be a problem. We would just make a vaccine against it or a drug against it, and end of story. The whole point is we can't know. So what does that mean we have to do? We have to have real surveillance systems in place all over the world. And the United States is abysmal because, this is one of the reasons why we have such poor surveillance to know whether or not we have variants in the United States. It's only because of an academic lab in Ohio Then we found out there's 2 variants that had never been seen anywhere else in the world in Columbus, Ohio. And it's only because of an academic lab in California that this new dangerous variant was found there. We don't have an integrated sense of public health needs for the population as a whole and medical needs, because we have this very fragmented medical system, this mix of public and private, that means that the kind of thing they're doing in the UK can't be mimicked here, or that they're doing in Denmark can't be mimicked here, because they have a national health system and they routinely just take random samples of viruses coming into their national health system and screen them, run genomic tests on them. But we don't have a national health system. And private hospitals don't want to take on extra costs. They don't want to have responsibility for this sort of thing. And so we don't have the capacity to do the appropriate surveillance. We need to step forward and say, look, this is existential, right? This is life and death. Therefore, we've got to break through all these barriers in the United States and come up with ways that the public and private sector will both agree to do routine surveillance for the known and the unknown, for the old and the new, in ways that are smart and that involve our best genomic sequencing technology. We have the tech, we just don't have the scheme and the payment and the legal priorities.
Right. Well, the key takeaway from this is that we need to listen to science, I think.
Okay.
Laurie, thank you so much for
Thank you so
all
much,
your
Laura.
hard
You are
work.
fantastic as
Yeah,
always. I mean, just such a depth of knowledge. Amazing.
indeed. And your reporting is amazing. So, folks, make sure to follow Laurie Garrett on Twitter, read her articles, check out her books, and we'll have you back as this progresses. I'm sure there'll be more to talk about.
Thanks, Tara. Thanks, Rick. Bye-bye.
Oh my goodness. It's like, you
Tara.
do Jeez, where's the drink tonight? My God. But we have
Right?
to have tough conversations, because people know that when they come to us here at the Breakdown, that we are here to inform. And we're trusted voices. People know that we're going to give it to them straight. If this is what it is, we're going to tell you. You're not going to get anything candy coated from us here, because
There's no
that's not the
BSing
real
you.
world. That's
That's
right.
right.
That's why we do what we do, and we we take the good with the bad, but you will be informed, and that's what we need to have. So before we go tonight, we have something I think we can at least have some type of levity to lighten this up, for goodness sakes. The Republicans have been now, they've been talking about downplaying the pandemic, and even as we see what's going on with hundreds of thousands of people dying, and they've gone out of their way to deny that the pandemic is as serious as it is. So we found something that might help explain what their thinking is. Let's take a look.
Has your party presided over the deaths of more than 400,000 Americans after you've denied and then bungled the response to a historic pandemic? Maybe you're thinking, now is the time to stop denying. Well, you'd be wrong. The Liar's Guide to COVID Denialism. Step 1. Go to great lengths to show there is no danger at all.
Don't let it dominate you. Don't be afraid of it. You're going to beat it. We have the best medical equipment. We have the best medicines.
Step 2. If that didn't work and your constituents still fear for their lives, mock their feeble attempts to stay safe.
Look, members of Congress are human petri dishes. We fly through the dirtiest airports. We touch everyone we meet. So if anyone's going to get coronavirus, it's probably going to be Congress.
Step 3. Always attack the experts. Their facts are inconvenient and disruptive to your revenue streams.
One person over at the CDC, he's a left-wing activist. He proudly displays a transgender flag in his Twitter account. Man of science or political activist?
Step 4. Take credit for the vaccine. You'll need to act fast to frame the narrative now that Dr. Fauci is free to run his dirty little mouth.
The president who talks about unity has not yet been able to bring himself to say those words, to thank Donald Trump and the Trump administration for what they did.
Why not name the vaccine the Trump? You know, make it like, have you gotten your Trump yet? No, it'd be a nice gesture to him.
Step 5. When all else fails, blame the Democrats. Hell, they've been in office for, 6 days? And still the pandemic rages.
Restructure, but they're minimizing on getting COVID under control. It's going to take a lot of time. Our team is eager. He's going to do this on day one.
Remember, the mess you created is Joe Biden's problem now. Thanks for tuning in. Join us next time when Marco Rubio explains how he got the vaccine before America's beloved grandmothers.
What a group. What a group.
We're going to get through it.
Well,
get vaccinated. When you get a chance, get vaccinated.
That's right. And that's our call to action tonight, Rick Wilson. It is to get vaccinated. And as difficult as this has been, it's different in every state. No one quite knows where to go, what website to sign up on. It is a challenge right now until things can get it, the Biden administration can get it together. But what you can do is if you have an elderly parent or parents or grandmother, and you are able to go online and help them or take them to the appointments and stay with them, do that because they need that assistance. Not everyone has a computer. I remember what it was like trying to teach my grandfather how to use his iPhone. It was a thing. It was a sight to behold. So it can be a challenge for people who are over 80, over 90 years old. So be a good Samaritan, help your family out if you can with getting the vaccine. And since we don't really have a centralized way, a website or something resource to tell you where you can and cannot go, the best resource right now is to consult with your doctor, with your family physician, ask them, they will know until we're able to get a more nationalized or even statewide resource to help people out. So that is our call to action tonight. And as we get more information about it, we will continue to bring it to you guys to help you because that's what we're here to do is inform. So on that note, have a good evening. We will see you again on Thursday. We're going to be talking to some great guests on Thursday. We have Susan Page. We're going to talk to her about what's happening with Congress. And we have Norm Ornstein from the American Enterprise Institute. We're going to talk a little impeachment. And don't forget to check out the new show on LPTV. We're speaking tomorrow night at 9 right here on LPTV. Thank you guys, and we will see you Thursday.
See you next time.
We're Speaking is a show that elevates and amplifies the diversity and power of women's voices.
Black women are hugely responsible for getting Donald Trump, an incredibly racist president, out of the White House. We can't have real progress without real people.
So we want to hear from all of you. Text us, tweet us, come hang out in our Zoom room.
Welcome to We're Speaking on LPTV.
Of history as something that's in the past and forget that we are making it.
Josh Hawley.
Oh, Josh.
You had it all. You were on track for a bright career.
So much potential.
A leader in American politics.
Building a legacy.
You went to the right schools.
Stanford,
Harvard, Yale. You built your connections.
On your way up.
Won your seat.
A winner.
It had all come together.
You didn't learn a thing.
But then,
Sedition.
you made a choice.
The wrong choice.
A choice to stand against America.
Traitors.
You stood with insurgency instead of democracy.
What a waste.
You pledged your allegiance to Donald Trump.
You're his guy.
And all that came with him.
White supremacists.
These are your followers now.
Losers.
These are your allies.
You're a disgrace.
You made your choice.
What were you thinking?
The wrong choice.
What will you do now?
You can't distance yourself from it.
You can't escape it.
You led it.
They were following you.
This
Your fault.
is your coup.
Your failure.
Hey guys, hope you're doing well. Just watching my algorithms get crushed. I guess I did something to piss off the Instagram gods, so hopefully you're seeing this stuff anyway. We'll do what we can. Talk to you soon.